everyone. Today, Josh Fisher and I will be meeting with somebody we've not met before. He actually is in charge of animal services for a rural shelter in Arkansas. They have a population of about 28,000 in Carroll County with about 600 square miles, 3 municipalities. They handle about 400 to 500 animals annually, and they rely on two thrift stores to fund the majority of the organization. Prior to joining the organization, Cole Wakefield, who is the Animal Services Director, spent some time at Hope Humane in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And right now, he has been in his position for only a few months, starting in November of 2019, just in time to get his feet wet and ready for COVID-19 to strike. So today we wanted to talk to Cole Wakefield about rural shelters and how they're handling COVID. So Cole, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Well, a lot of people are probably wondering how we got connected, and it's because you actually went on our general discussion forum and raised the issue. Rural animal shelters, nobody's really talking about them. And so I jumped on and said, well, let's talk about them. So we're really happy that you could be with us and start this conversation about how communities are all very different in this COVID pandemic.
Yeah. Another challenge of rural work. And can you make sure that everybody is like off the internet if there's anybody else on their phone or anything? No. Sorry, he did a radio shot. So we everything is and I'll make sure my phone is off the Wi-Fi. That may help. But we have like a 10 or an 8 megabit connection, which is the best we can get.
Oh my gosh.
When I got here, we were on a Wi-Fi hotspot with a 20 gig limit, and we just now got actual internet to the shelter.
Oh, well, the challenges of rural shelters.
Absolutely.
Here we are. We've identified one.
So Cole, how are you doing? How's your team doing?
We're doing good. We've been very fortunate in that even though our intake numbers are up significantly, our adoption numbers were also up, and that we took in this record number, but we're not overcrowded. We're not quite to capacity yet. One of these was a puppy mill dump of 24 Chihuahua Chiweenie little angry things, but we were able to find a rescue partner for transport within a matter of days to get them moved on. And there's about 8 or 9 in one kennel, but it's okay, they fit because they're tiny.
So Cole, with you guys having to shut down intake for about a month, have you had any policy changes or process and procedural changes since COVID that have impacted your operation and that are going to be lasting changes?
Yes and no. And some of this was coming in as we were transitioning into a more progressive approach in general as an organization, and we were able to use some of the COVID time. When we closed intakes, in adoption rates stayed solid, we were empty, almost empty there, but we still wanted to retain staff. So we had everybody go through fear-free certification. And that's now a part of our just standard onboarding. If you're working with animals, then you're going to do the fear-free shelters course. And things like, so we've encouraged that, and we were able to do some repairs to the building, things like that you couldn't do when you had full kennels.
So what do you see as kind of, as a rural shelter in America and post, kind of on the tail end and post-COVID, moving into what our new normal may look like? What do you see that being for you?
I worry that as that we're not really going to feel the impact until another 30 to 90 days, as people feel the true economic uh, harm that is done. And then in rural shelter, I mean, rural shelters are all surrounded by large and small scale puppy mills, whether they're backyard operations or barn operations. What's going to happen if people stop purchasing puppies, which I think we would all agree is a good thing. But if all these places collapse at once, and that may be where our 24 Chiweenies came in, uh, that's a lot. That'll be a lot for rural shelters to absorb if we're losing, all of a sudden we're asked for all these puppy mill dumps. And at the same time, we have a lot of our pressure is taken off of us by, a small group of, rescues run by individuals who are dedicated and put a lot of their own energy and assets into it. But, if the economy makes it hard for them to raise money too, at the same time everything else is going on, are we going to be expected or have to try to absorb any overflow or the results of any of them closing? So, we just haven't seen that response that we were getting in a lot of the urban shelters as their sort of answer to the damages of COVID. And also as the new model of animal welfare is we're going to put everybody in foster homes. But we're not seeing that come up here. We're not seeing that response here. It's, and it's just a different community. Though I have heard from some rural shelters that are doing good with foster programs, but I've also heard from many that have tried that foster push and they're just not getting it. And it's the same issue with volunteers. We don't have that population density. We don't have that housing density of people who can just take in these animals. So,
Sure.
So I think that's something that we have to figure out. The model coming out from a lot of the large agencies is that foster model. And so we're going to have to figure out what else is going to work here and how do we supplement it if it's not as strong here.
Sure.
What part of the animal social services new, model, how can we make that work in rural settings? Because I think we all agree
Sure.
that that diversion and getting out there and preventing the animals from ever coming in is key. But we may need to focus things in a little bit different direction to make that happen in a rural environment as opposed to the urban environment.
Absolutely. And I think since you brought up that human support services model, that's something that is definitely a point of discussion around that, is that every community is different. And so it's going to have to be tailored to each community, right?
Right.
And you mentioned when you were talking about the recent large number puppy mill intake that you had some success with transport. So is that potentially something that could grow and expand? You're talking about all of these intakes, and I'm thinking about these bigger organizations that 24 Chiweenie puppies is like gold to a lot of these folks, right? So is there an opportunity there?
Yeah, I mean, transport is, I think transport's very important, valuable. My fear though is that we need to just be ready for it. Maybe it won't happen, and maybe things will settle out. The economy won't be as bad as we're all worried it will be. This sort of nightmare situation will work itself out. But how much stress can the transport system? How much stress can take out? And then if the economy starts getting really bad for our partners up north, and they start dealing with an uptake in surrenders and then uptake in their own issues, where are they going to be able to pull at those numbers? It's just, if the whole system is overwhelmed, what's going to happen? And that's what's great. But transporting is great. But it's just like sheltering. It's not the solution. It's simply the bucket of water underneath the leaky roof. We've got to get up on the roof and patch it if we really want to make a change. And
Right.
and I think we're finally realizing that as a industry as a whole. I just and I sometimes we get these guidance and these models, and we go, that's great, but we need help trying to figure something else out that's going to work for us. I want to build a social services model in Carroll County, and I want it to be viable. And I think it's the only way that we're going to solve our problem. But the playbook that we're getting from the more urban shelters and from our large national organizations, I just don't think is going to mold in at a one-for-one way.
Sure. So one of the things that I've heard from some rural communities here in North Carolina is surrounding resource deserts, right? So access to care, access to support, veterinary clinics, that kind of thing. Is that something you experience in Carroll County?
We have vets, but we also, that serve a good part of the county, but then we also have a large part of our county that can't afford to go even to the vets that serve our county. In just a little bit outside of the county, up into Missouri, up into our neighboring counties, where those sort of service deserts do exist, and we pull in from there too. I mean, people come to us because they don't have those resources where they're at. Uh, but that definitely is happening. I think a lot of it needs to do with affordable care. You can have 15 vets on one street, but if the services there aren't affordable to somebody who is making $10 an hour, then you might as well not have a vet at all.
The access piece is key.
Yeah.
So what do you see for your community? And because being a nonprofit that doesn't have a municipal contract, you have kind of almost a more regional approach, right?
Right.
So what do you see as next for your region?
We're in an interesting situation here in that on the west side of the county, which we're based on the edge of where the shelter is Eureka Springs, which is a retirement and tourism sort of hub that has a whole different economy than the rest of the county. So the per capita income inside Eureka is higher than the rest of the county, and Eureka is what has financially supported us largely, just because of that type of community. So now our goal, we have to figure out where the real need is, though, is in the eastern side of the county, where we deal with a more rural and more working class environment. And so that's our next thing, is how can we really reach that, where we're most needed. And we started when COVID hit and people started getting laid off. We started doing food banking, providing pet food to the local food banks, and we want to try to find other ways to provide preventatives. Heartworms and tick-borne diseases are a big problem out here, and so we're trying to find ways that we can provide discounted or free preventatives and that sort of thing as we lead into a more proactive approach than to taking care of animals.
How would you expect the national conversation to talk about rural shelters? What's missing in that conversation?
A lot of those models that can be brought into the rural setting, some really great things that develop out of those resources. But just that pause to go, okay, well, what if they don't have that volunteer base? And what if it's not a matter of not asking for volunteers, it's just a matter that the community can't support that level of volunteers? And I think, and we realize is that, a lot of the urban environments, they have the large central organizations that serve a large population. Well, but there's 15 different organizations that serve that same number of populations spread out over a rural environment. And also a lot of your rural, organizations are either all volunteer or mostly volunteer. They may be led by people who aren't hooked into the association, aren't hooked into ASPCA Pro, who don't know that these resources are out there. They're just people who have a passion and, wanted to change something in their community. So I think we've got to do better of reaching out in general to all these small organizations, finding ways that we can leverage them and get that information out to them. It's just, I think there's different challenges of organization, and just would like to see that recognized and say, okay, hey, this is working in the city. So when we propose, and I really want to realize that, this new thing, like fostering is awesome, but I don't think fostering is going to solve the problems that people feel like it's solving in large concentrated population areas. I don't think it's going to work like that as well in the rural areas. And I would love for it to. And I love the positive news and I love the positive things, but we have to be real that we can show empty kennels all we want all day, but that's because intakes were down. And what shelter animals count, 51%. People closed their doors and emptied their shelters. That's not solving the problem. And I think we've got to make sure that we're looking at things as a whole. Let's promote the good and let's smile and be happy about our wins, but we can't let that say, oh, well, look what we did. But I mean, I can shut my doors and empty my kennels. Anybody can. There's so much more to it. And I just worry that, and maybe these conversations are going on behind closed doors. But, I just worry that we haven't looked at this whole crisis as a whole, and that it may come back and bite us. And I hope it doesn't. I hope everything goes great. I really do. I want it, I'm a happy, positive person, right? And I celebrate good things. But I just, my nightmare is that in 2 to 3 months, we may be drowning and without a plan. And part of it is, you realize if you work in the South, Josh, you understand that, rural governments aren't going to pay a penny more because somebody slaps no kill on their label. They have, limited budgets, and they have constituents calling about their stray dogs, and they want the lowest price and the most efficient way to handle that. And we can't market it as, well, it's going to cost the county more, but we're going to do the right thing. The right thing for them is to get the dog off the street, and whatever happens after that happens, because they're worried about, the 1,000 miles of county roads they have to maintain, and they're underfunded social services, and they're underfunded schools. So, and that's another thing, we have to realize that it's just a different dynamic in the South and in the Southern. People still love their animals. People here love their animals just as much as anywhere else, and they want to do right by them. But the generation of humane education hasn't happened. All these things that people are taking for granted in other places, because these organizations have been acting on that in the last 10 to 20 years, it just hasn't happened here yet. So we have to remember, we can't engage even the population the same way. We have to do work, that's a little bit different.
Yeah, and I think that that's an important piece of it. Like Catherine has said too, in that this whole concept, one of the things that we have to keep in mind through the conversations is that these are pilot programs and recommendations that have to be transferable, and something that has to be able to be modified to each community, because every community, be it rural, be it urban, be it a mix of both, they're different, right? And the challenges that they face are different, and the resources that they have are different. And so I think that that's something that we are acknowledging, but to your point, we need to deepen the conversation, right? And we need to potentially have some conversations around those regional issues and what, is facing, what's different as far as a Southeastern community versus a Northeastern community or a West Coast community, and have some regional conversations about what some of the challenges are, so that we can help the process of transitioning those models. Because my fear, and one thing, Cole, that I really appreciate you bringing up, is that we will lose people's willingness to even have the conversation if we don't acknowledge the differences from jump.
Cole, thank you for spending time with us today. It's been a pleasure to meet you. We just really wish you the best of luck, and we'll keep talking with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I think, and this is what it's all about, is a conversation and getting it started. We work in one of the most unique industries where people will spend a lot of money and work a lot of time and work really hard to come up with an answer and then share it with everybody. And that's pretty awesome. And that's what makes me happy to be a part of things here. We're all working together for the same thing. And, I think we can do good as a country and as an industry as a whole. We just got to keep talking and keep working together.
Absolutely. It was great to meet you, Cole.